Where does wisdom begin? Some questions sound simple, yet the longer we live, the more we endure, lose, love, and start again. The more we realize these simple questions quietly hold up an entire life. Where does wisdom begin? Why do some people study endlessly, yet their hearts remain tangled? Why do some practice for years and still flare up easily, still touchy, still wounded in the same old ways? Why do we keep trying to fix ourselves, reading, listening, reflecting, enduring? Yet when something goes against us, the mind still snaps back like a reflex. If you have ever felt that way, you are not wrong. You are simply standing at a door most of us walk past again and again, without realizing it is a door. We often assume wisdom lies somewhere ahead. Learn more and you'll have more. Practice more and you'll get closer. Listen more and you'll become clear. Then one day, a strange emptiness appears. More learning still doesn't feel like enough. More listening still doesn't bring peace. More practice still doesn't feel light. As if something essential is right in front of us, yet we keep looking slightly to the side. Bodhidharma, the first patriarch of Zen, spoke bluntly. He did not deny scriptures, and he did not deny discipline, but he pointed to something many of us fear to face. Some suffering cannot be solved by adding more opinions, more advice, more theories, because the root of suffering is not a lack of information. The root is that we do not see how our own mind operates. We get angry and don't truly know why. We feel sad and don't truly know why. We worry and don't truly know why. We react quickly and only later sit down to manufacture explanations. We think life is what hurts us, but often life merely presents a situation. Whether it becomes suffering, heavy or light, lasting or dissolving, depends on how the mind clings in the first instant, builds a story around what happened, and then believes the story is real. Sometimes we think we are living in the present, but we are actually living inside layers of interpretation about the present. Sometimes we think we are practicing, but we are secretly trying to become a correct version of ourselves, so we can feel safe, feel good, feel approved of. Sometimes we think we are seeking wisdom, but we are really chasing certainty. Some final answer outside us that will stop the mind from trembling. Bodhidharma did not promise miracles. He offered a simple reminder. Wisdom is not something you must travel far to find. It is already here, only covered over. And what covers it is not the world, not other people, not fate. It is the thin but dense layers within us. Reflexive reaction, the ego's need to be right, the fear of being looked down on, the craving for recognition, the "I already know" that closes us to fresh truth, the way we keep running faster than ourselves. So if wisdom is innate, why do we still feel blind? Because we rarely look straight. We look outward, at people, at life, at the past, at the future, but we seldom look directly at the mind as it arises. The instant a sentence touches the self, a glance makes us shrink. Someone else's success stirs discomfort. A criticism triggers the urge to defend. These moments are tiny, but they are precisely where wisdom either begins or remains hidden. So before asking, where does wisdom begin? Try the harder question. What prevents wisdom from sprouting in me? What makes me repeat the same pattern of suffering, only changing the scenery? What makes me react in the same way, even after I promised myself I would stay calm? Why do other people's words pull me so easily, even when I know I should let them go? You don't need to answer immediately. You only need to hold one red thread from this moment onward. Wisdom does not begin by learning more. It begins by seeing rightly, seeing what is happening in the mind, seeing the mechanism of clinging, seeing how ego manufactures stories, seeing a single thought at the moment it is born before it drags you away. That is why studying a lot can still leave the mind unclear. There is a familiar paradox. The more we read and collect teachings, the less light we sometimes feel. We may know many correct ideas, yet a small incident still throws us. We understand fine principles, yet the moment pride is touched, we react instantly. Bodhidharma's question cuts through. If wisdom truly came from accumulation, why do some people study all their lives and still do not awaken? This isn't to dismiss learning, but to distinguish what we often confuse: knowing and seeing. Knowing is memory, concept, the ability to repeat the right words. Seeing is different. Truth touches your inner life directly, and you recognize you are inside what is being described. Many possess a storehouse of knowledge, but not living wisdom. Knowledge can make you sound right, argue well, explain deeply. Yet when fear, envy, or the need to win rises, everything learned seems to vanish, not because it was forgotten, but because it never reached the place where the mind actually moves. Bodhidharma called that studying outside the gate. Teachings are a gate, methods are a gate. But you can stand outside a gate and describe the house perfectly and still never step inside. Some stand so long they mistake familiarity for arrival, until a gust of conflict, a harsh word, a small loss reveals they were never inside at all. A gentle experiment is enough. Breathe in slowly, breathe out slowly, and listen to what is present. Curiosity, doubt, resonance, fatigue. Name it, and let it stand there like a cloud resting in the sky. No chasing, no pushing away, only seeing. If you can see even once in that way, wisdom has already begun. Wisdom does not come from piling more on. It comes from stopping in the right place, stopping the moment the mind begins to stir, stopping the instant the ego tries to step in, stopping right before you react out of old habit. Without that stopping, no matter how much you learn, you only add weight to memory. With it, even a single sentence or a very small event can light up a whole region of the heart. So when you wonder why learning still doesn't bring clarity, Bodhidharma does not blame the learner. He simply reminds us, don't mistake the door for the house, the map for the road, the understanding in the head for the seeing in the heart. And if you recognize yourself in that paradox, knowing a lot yet still suffering, there is no need for self-blame. Just notice. Just see. Be honest for one small moment. Because the moment you see confusion clearly, wisdom has already begun. There is a hard truth. Wisdom does not arise from words. Not because words are wrong, but because words are only pointers. They are not the place to rest. If wisdom truly came from language, then learning enough would finish the job. Yet reality shows the opposite. The more we learn, the more entangled we can become. The more we know, the more rigid we can grow. Bodhidharma spoke plainly. A person may recite countless sutras, but if they do not see their own true nature, they are still circling around letters. This is not a rejection of scripture, only a reminder of its limits. Words belong to memory. They live in the past. You read, you understand, you store. But wisdom lives in the living instant. When pride is touched, when the heart tightens, when comparison flashes, when a thin strand of fear appears. Those moments are not inside books. They arise inside you, and they vanish quickly. The problem is that we often use words to replace seeing. We read, "Do not cling," and assume we have let go. We hear, "Everything is impermanent," and assume we have understood. We know, "Anger brings suffering," and think we have surpassed anger. But when someone says one irritating line, anger leaps up intact. In that moment, words cannot help, because words stand outside observing while the mind runs its old program. Bodhidharma does not say to throw away the sutras. He says, don't make them your shelter. Scripture is a mirror, not a face, meant for seeing, not for decoration. If you paste teachings onto your daily life, you may gain a correct image of yourself while underneath, the mind continues as before. The gap between the correct image and inner reality becomes exhaustion. Consider something ordinary. You read, "Don't compare." You nod. It makes sense. Then one day you watch someone else being praised, lifted up, placed above you. In that moment, if you only repeat, "Don't compare," you may be using words to press down a feeling. But if you can see directly, wanting to win has arisen, fear of being lesser, hunger to be recognized, then wisdom is present. Not because you remembered the teaching, but because you saw what moved. Meaning comes after seeing. Seeing comes before meaning. Yet we often reverse the order. We wait to understand before we live. But real wisdom opens when we live, and then we see. After seeing, words become confirmation, not the source. One danger of learning a lot is the soothing thought, "I already know." It feels safe, and it closes the door. When you think you know, you stop observing. When you stop observing, wisdom has no soil to sprout. Bodhidharma warned that knowledge can become an obstacle. When it is not illuminated by direct seeing, it turns into fine dust. So subtle, it doesn't blind at once, only makes everything slightly dim. Dim long enough, we get used to it and call it brightness. So, wisdom is not born from words, does not mean opposing words. It means putting words in their proper place. Words are the finger pointing to the moon. If you stare at the finger, you forget the moon. Words are a map. If you clutch the map but never walk, you go nowhere. Zen distills this into one axis. Directly point to the human mind. No detours, no ornate explanations, no demand for belief. Only a straight gesture, look. Bodhidharma turned the learner back toward the mind itself, not after everything is over, not as analysis through memory, but on the spot. We are used to seeing life through intermediaries, thoughts, judgments, right and wrong, good and bad, the story we tell about what happened. Direct pointing means dropping those layers, not interpreting, not justifying, not rationalizing, simply seeing what is present. Someone says something that irritates you. Normally, the mind runs outward. They're wrong. They were careless. They disrespected me. Suffering begins right there. Direct pointing does not follow that road. It turns back at the instant of contact and asks, what just arose in me? A prick of pride? A fear of being lowered? An impulse to strike back? When you see that, you do not need to do anything else. Seeing itself is already wisdom. Many assume you need special silence to look into the mind. Bodhidharma points to the opposite. The mind is clearest not when it is calm, but when it is stirred, when it resents, hurts, envies, fears. In those moments, the mind reveals itself. If you do not avoid or suppress, if you dare to look straight, the gate opens. We live inside the mind, yet rarely look at it. We let it lead us, react for us, decide our tone and stance. Because we do not look, we mistake it for me. We believe the reaction is our nature. We believe the emotion is final truth. Direct pointing is a turning from outside to inside, from story to raw feeling, from reasons to the first naked reaction. Not fixing, not judging, not trying to become better, only seeing. And crucially, this is not thinking about the mind, it is seeing the mind. Thinking says, I'm angry because they said that. Seeing feels the tightening in the chest, the quick breath, the heat in the face, the emotional current moving through you. Seeing is immediate. Thinking is second-hand. Wisdom does not arise from second-hand. This is why humans suffer, not because we lack knowledge, but because we do not see the mind's mechanism. We react first and understand later. We feel sad and then hunt for reasons. The reaction is fast and familiar, so we assume it is who I am. Watch an ordinary day. You wake, read a message that isn't what you hoped, and the heart sinks. Before understanding anything, the mind has tightened. The message lasted seconds, yet its aftertaste pulls the whole day. Not because the event was big, but because the mind grabbed it and would not let go. We often think life repeats the same suffering, but if you look closely, it isn't life that repeats, it is the mind. Scenes change, people change, circumstances change, yet the inner reaction stays strangely similar. The same touchiness, the same anger, the same comparing, only dressed differently. Because we don't see this mechanism, we fall into an illusion. If I learn more, I'll suffer less. Yet understanding without seeing stays in the head while the mind runs on a different track. The gap between I know what's right and I can't live it becomes the birthplace of self-blame and discouragement. Bodhidharma does not tell us to suppress reactions or fix ourselves quickly. He emphasizes one thing: see clearly. See that you are reacting. See that the reaction is familiar. See that it is not absolute truth, only an old pattern repeating. The moment this seeing appears, even faintly, the loop develops a crack. You don't have to change immediately, just recognize, my mind is doing this. When you see the mechanism, you begin to separate what you used to mix together, the event and the interpretation. The event is what happened. The interpretation is the story the mind builds. The event is often brief. The story drags on. Suffering isn't inside the event. It is inside the interpretation. And interpretation has power only when you don't notice it forming. Wisdom does not come from gathering more. It comes from removing. When we feel not okay, we want to add more knowledge, more methods, more reassurance. Yet the more we add, the heavier we feel. Bodhidharma points against the crowd. Wisdom is not produced by adding to the mind, but by thinning the layers that cover it. These layers are subtle: reflex, ego, fear, craving, old memory intruding into the present. Each veil is thin, but stacked together they dim seeing. Where seeing is dim, wisdom has no ground to grow. Removing does not mean avoiding emotion. It means seeing emotion without fusing with it. Sadness is sadness. Anger is anger. Worry is worry. They come, stay, pass. What makes them heavy is the hand that grabs them and names them me. Here is the subtle truth. You don't drop them by force. You drop them through seeing. When you clearly see a reaction, it weakens, not because you crushed it, but because you no longer merge your identity with it. That non-identifying is precisely where wisdom appears. Ignorance is not simply not knowing. It is knowing wrongly and believing it is right. Often it hides in certainty. My reaction is reasonable. I suffer because of them. I'm angry because of the situation. These assumptions run automatically, unexamined. This is ignorance, not an empty mind, but an unrecognized lens, warped yet trusted. Notice the moments you feel absolutely sure you are right, sure the other is wrong. In that certainty, the mind closes. You stop listening. You become a guard protecting a view. And when the mind closes, wisdom has no entrance. Bodhidharma teaches something subtler than rejecting knowledge. Always leave a small opening for fresh seeing. Don't let yesterday's knowing lock up today's perception. A clear sign of ignorance is this: the more you insist you're right, the harder it is to feel light. If you are right, but your heart is not lighter, that rightness needs to be re-examined. Among all veils, the most refined is the illusion of I. Not crude arrogance, but the everyday ego, reasonable, familiar, almost indistinguishable from me. Because it is so familiar, we rarely doubt it. Yet the ego lives on comparison. It needs to be right, to be approved, to be above. It fears being dismissed, being lesser, being left behind. So it reacts, constructs stories, justifies itself, so convincingly we mistake it for wisdom when it is only self-protection. A paradox. Practitioners can cling to ego longer than ordinary people. Practice can quietly produce the thought, "I've improved. I understand deeply." If unseen, that becomes a new veil, thinner yet harder to remove. When ego wears a spiritual robe, it becomes subtle. The remedy is not destruction, it is seeing. The moment you see, this is the ego wanting to be right, you step a little outside it. And that small distance is enough for wisdom to stand. Close to ego is another veil, the illusion of emotion. We don't only have emotions, we identify with them. Sad, and we become a sad person. Angry, and we become an angry person. Worried, and we conclude the world is truly worrying. Emotion colors perception so completely that we mistake the coloring for reality. When emotion surges, we usually follow it or fight it. Both are ways of being carried away. Bodhidharma teaches neither chasing nor suppressing. He teaches looking, like watching weather. Sadness is here. Anger arose, seeing without adding story. Clouds may cover the sky, but clouds are not the sky. This is where wisdom begins in a fine distinction. Emotion is present, and I am not emotion. The instant you see that, even for 1 second, you step out of old momentum. You don't need to fix the feeling. You only need to stop granting it the power to define you. Another thin yet dangerous veil is, I already know. It feels stable, knowledgeable, even mature, but it closes the door. When the mind decides it knows, it stops seeing. The past is pressed onto the present. People change, conditions change, even you change. But certainty makes yesterday's lens rule today. One sign of I already know is stiffness. When someone disagrees, it's hard to listen. When reality doesn't match your understanding, you feel irritated. True wisdom is softer. It doesn't need protection. Time is another thing we trust wrongly. Many place their faith in years. Practice long enough and you'll be bright. But time does not produce wisdom. Time only reveals what is already present. Someone anxious at 20 may be anxious at 60 if there is no seeing. One instant of right seeing is worth more than 10 years of walking in the wrong direction. Not because effort is useless, but because direction matters more than duration. Some worry, have I lived too long in ignorance? Am I too late? In Bodhidharma's spirit, there is no early or late for seeing. There is only seeing or not seeing. When you see, ignorance loses its total grip immediately. Even karma can become a veil when used as a final explanation. It must be karma. If that conclusion stops observation, it stops wisdom. Bodhidharma treats karma as the living current of the mind. How you think, react, cling, karma forms accordingly. Not fixed destiny, but habit in motion. And habit changes when it is seen. Finally, there is the most refined veil, seeking the way outside yourself. Searching for a teacher, a method, a better environment can look noble, but it can also hide avoidance. Bodhidharma strikes here. Outside mind, there is no Dharma. No one can see for you. No one can enter the instant your mind flares. Teachers can point, methods can open doors, but seeing is yours. If you can't see in daily noise and friction, then even in a quiet temple, you will only meet what you carried in. The way is not somewhere else. When you are sad, that is the doorway. When you are angry, that is the doorway. Not because sadness is the way, but because that is where the mind is most clearly at work. So when does wisdom truly arise? Not in a special state, not only in deep stillness, not when you understand one more idea, but when you see one thought correctly as it is arising. One right seeing in a single thought sounds small, yet it can turn a life. You get good news and feel relieved. Then you hear someone else received better news and comparison flashes. Why are they ahead? If you don't see it, you're swept into heaviness. If you see it at the moment it arises, comparison, ego, clinging. Wisdom is already present. Not as a moral command, not as forced letting go, but as direct seeing. Wisdom doesn't need to be grand. It only needs to be enough that you are not dragged as before. One right seeing may not remake your life overnight, but it changes the direction. From being swept away to having space, from reflex to observation, from story to reality. Then a practical question comes. How does seeing become steady instead of flashing and fading? We often assume steadiness requires more control, more tightening, more holding. Yet that very tightening creates a new tension, a practicing ego. Bodhidharma doesn't teach you to hold the seeing. He teaches you to return. Returning is not forceful. It is gentle, like realizing you wandered and simply coming back. Seeing becomes unstable when we turn it into a goal, when we demand to be always mindful, always bright, always unreactive. That demand is another reaction. Lasting wisdom doesn't come from maintaining a special state. It comes from seeing again and again. See, forget, remember, return. It repeats like breathing. No one inhales once and stops, and no one scolds themselves for needing the next breath. Wisdom, too, lives by the rhythm of returning, not by maintaining perfection. Some days you will feel awake, some days drained. If you imagine a wise person never has an irritable day, you will abandon the path too early. But if wisdom is simply the ability to recognize, I am irritable, then even your worst day becomes practice. Return to something small, one breath, one sensation, one thought beginning. No long analysis. Simply, the mind is like this. Return without scolding yourself. Meet your returning like meeting an old friend. I wandered again. No problem. I'm back. Over time, not through willpower but through familiarity, the interval between a thought arising and your seeing it becomes shorter. At first you notice only after everything is over. Then you notice while it's happening. Sometimes you notice right as it begins, not because you forced it, but because the mind has grown used to being seen. Walking steadily is not a dramatic leap. It can be one honest moment a day. One moment you notice comparison, one moment you catch the urge to blame, one moment you feel pride tighten. Just one clean seeing, no fixing, no suppressing. and the seed is watered. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Life itself is the training hall. When you're tired, irritated, disappointed, that is when the mind shows itself most clearly. A beautiful sign you're walking rightly is that you become less impatient with yourself. You stop demanding immediate results. You simply keep returning. And then wisdom enters ordinary life, not as something separate from life, but as the way you meet life. A careless remark, a late message, a plan disrupted, these become points of contact for seeing. You don't need to fix the other person or the situation. You only need to recognize, my mind moved. This doesn't make you obsessively self-watching. It makes you less reactive. When you know a thought is only a thought, you don't have to defend it. When you know emotion is only emotion, you don't have to perform it. The mind softens. It lightens. And one day you may notice you no longer practice the way you used to. Not because you became lazy, but because seeing has become natural. You pause before speaking. You return before going too far. Not perfect, but real. By now, the core is simple. Wisdom is not something to accumulate, not a prize for those who walked the longest, not a distant light at the end of the road. Wisdom arises when you dare to look directly at your own mind in the very moment it is operating. Inside a small reaction, a flicker of winning and losing, a swell of discomfort, a subtle craving just beginning. You will still forget. You will still react. That does not mean you're walking wrong. It means you are alive, learning, walking a real path. Only one thing matters. Don't abandon returning. Each return, late or brief, is the lamp being lit again. Wisdom doesn't require you to become someone else. It asks only honesty. Honest about drifting. Honest about what arises. Honest about clinging. No forcing, no suppression, no judgment. Only seeing. In that seeing, a different kind of lightness appears. Not the lightness of escaping life, but the lightness of no longer being pulled as before. Bodhidharma's path is not searching. It is returning, many times, patiently, without exhaustion. Each return doesn't add something new. It removes one more veil. If right now you feel even a little stillness, a little clarity, or simply a desire to live more slowly and truthfully with yourself, that is enough. Keep one small thing. Return and look at your mind at least once each day. From there, the journey continues, less theory, more living, until wisdom is no longer something you understand, but something that breathes with you in every ordinary step, every ordinary reaction, every ordinary day.